U.S.-Africa trade has been impacted by the proposed policies and those that have taken effect in 2025 alone. Just last week on Tuesday, the President of the United States announced that he would place over 10% tariff on smaller nations, including those throughout the African continent and the Caribbean regions. When it comes to the African Growth and Opportunities Act, or AGOA, this act was enacted in 2000 and renewed in 2015 to allow for duty-free access to the U.S. market for nearly 2,000 goods coming from the eligible 32 African nations. However, AGOA is set to expire in September of this year, and there does not seem to be any clear sign that AGOA will be renewed. When we talk about these reciprocal tariffs, the announcements of the reciprocal tariffs have already had an impact on many countries throughout Africa. For example, the small landlocked country of Lesotho has the high tariff rate of 50%. Now, Lesotho also benefited from AGOA in terms of its garment exports to the United States duty-free, provided that these garments used U.S. yarn and fabric. South Africa, which is one of the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, looks forward to a tariff rate of 30% scheduled to take effect on August 1st. And finally, with the elimination of the U.S. Agency for International Development and its funding, which funded many of the regional trade hubs throughout sub-Saharan Africa. For example, I worked out of the Southern African Trade Hub. That also has an impact on the promotion and facilitation of trade between the United States and Africa. So with all of this going on in the background, many of you have reached out to me and during conversations throughout the year have asked the question, well, what can we expect in terms of U.S.-Africa trade moving forward? Hi, I'm Dr. Sarita Jackson, founder and CEO of the Global Research Institute of International Trade. Welcome to another episode of Trade on Tuesdays at 2. Well, with all of that I've described, here are two things that I encourage you to just watch out for. These are not necessarily tips as we continue to watch as things unfold this year. Nevertheless, two things to at least watch out for as we navigate U.S.-Africa trade moving forward. Tip number one is to look at or follow what is happening with the reauthorization of the African Growth and Opportunities Act, or AGOA, which seems like a distant possibility, and especially as it has been undermined by these reciprocal tariffs. And despite the fact that proposals were put forward in Congress last year to reauthorize AGOA, go ahead and still follow to see what happens. And then my point number two is to also be aware, familiarize yourselves with the different organizations, business associations, private sector organizations that have for a long time, not newly formed organizations, but for the longest time, have played a pivotal role in the promotion and facilitation of trade between the United States and different countries throughout the African continent. In sum, prepare for these changes, connect with the organizations that play a pivotal role in U.S.-Africa trade, and identifying alternative opportunities for businesses and trade, as well as investment between the United States and countries throughout the African continent. And I will address this in more detail in an upcoming newsletter based on your questions, as well as responses to a survey that was sent out earlier this year. And many of those responses focused on specific things to address as we talk about U.S. trade, U.S.-Africa trade, and investment. So go ahead. Subscribe to our free monthly newsletter. The link is in the description below. And thank you for joining us on another episode of Trade on Tuesdays at 2.